And third, luck is an indispensable partner in today's world. It remains a cultural and democratic powerhouse. It is home to the planet's richest biodiversity, half of the world's tropical forests, and is a key ally in the fight against climate change. With an impressive renewable energy capacity accounting for 60% of the power mix, double the world average, and rich in critical raw materials, LAC plays a vital role in our green and digital transition agenda. President von der Leyen will attend the CARICOM summit in Barbados this week. In a fast-changing and complex world, this high-level visit matters.
This week I saw this new video by Johnny Harris, and in it he's lying to you. The video looks amazing. It has map roll porn, and it's also wrong. He simplifies events, screws up the timeline, and he's rewriting history. As a historian, it's painful to watch. Since leaving Vox, Johnny Harris has become a YouTube god. Just putting his name in a title guarantees views. What? But with these views also came criticism. He's been accused of putting out propaganda, not citing sources, and today of simplifying history so much it's harmful. So what's this video actually about? Johnny Harris discusses a subject that has been the base for countless of books and academic discussion. How did some countries from a relatively unimportant region in the world just rise up and dominate everyone else? It's a big question.
A 500-year project of moving people and weapons and germs and language and violence.
And the outcome still influences our world today. So it's extra important to get the facts right. Don't get me wrong. I love Johnny Harris. He has inspired millions, including me. He's pretty much the reason map animation exists on YouTube, and he promotes therapy.
I'm a giant fan of therapy.
I like that, but he pushes storytelling far beyond the limits.
He doesn't promote therapy. That's an ad, bro. It's
Johnny
an
sets
ad.
the stage for his video. Europe was...
But the fact is, there wasn't an abundance of anything in Europe. Instead, Europeans were just farmers barely scraping by, constantly in debt to a few rich landlords. Life in Europe was scarce and miserable.
That really pissed off people in the comments. He then goes on to talk about empires that, according to Johnny, were doing just fine in this time.
Meanwhile, there was a bunch of other empires around the world that were thriving. All of these empires were trading with one another, making all of them even richer. They all had better everything than Europe did, and miserable Europeans eventually wanted in on all the trade.
So, what goes wrong here? Well, let's start with the whole wretched place and landlord thing. Johnny voices this general idea about Europe in the Middle Ages. Everything was shit and everyone went to bed without dinner. That sounds bad, right? Well, the time period he discusses saw a lot of new technological innovations that made agriculture way better. With all this innovation, there was a lot more food and the population of Europe grew a lot. Between the year 1000 and 1340, the population of Europe grew from about 38 million people to 73.5. And then the Black Death killed 30% of Europeans. But this Black Death actually made things a lot better for the survivors. It meant the end of serfdom in Western Europe, that landlord thingy Johnny Harris is talking about. Why? Well, labor was really scarce, and that meant that workers had a much better bargaining position against their landlords. Of course, this didn't happen everywhere at the same time, but even so, generally seen, the situation of the farms in European states definitely wasn't worse than those in the empire Johnny Harris mentions. So then Johnny says there were no shiny things in Europe.
There wasn't an abundance of anything in Europe.
But trade with the empire he mentions really existed for a long time. Since Roman times, there was the Silk Road. You know, this network of roads, shipping lanes and towns that connected Asia with Europe. Just sometimes the trade broke down for a bit. This is what happens when the Ottomans conquer Constantinople in 1453. They come in and introduce higher taxes. So Portugal and Spain, they didn't really search a route over land. They wanted to cut out the middlemen entirely. So the exploration of Spain and Portugal actually had a long history. Also, when he describes Europe in this time, he completely ignores one of the most pivotal moments in this time period, the Renaissance. This is a period after the Crusades, when knowledge from the Middle East was brought back. Scholars in the Italian states saw Roman and Greek texts in new light. This led to flourishing culture, improvements in architecture and art. I mean, the map that Johnny shows of the world, yeah, that was rediscovered in the Renaissance. Okay, so Europe wasn't this awful place. There were shiny things. But Europe was geopolitically isolated. And yes, they did want in on the trade in the East. So Johnny then goes on to explain why Spain wanted in on all the trade. Because of Portuguese action.
Portugal's workaround was literally to go around the continent of Africa. And suddenly the Portuguese are dressing in luxurious fabrics. Okay, so now Spain sees Portugal hitting the jackpot and they're kind of jelly. They want in on this too. They need to establish their own trade route to Asia.
Okay, so the Portuguese, they were flaunting their goods. Spain wanted in on the trade. Let's look at the timeline here. So Columbus leaves in 1492. What is the first time the Portuguese actually managed to reach India? Right. So no, the Portuguese were not successful in reaching India by sea until Columbus was well away. Well, we're on to Columbus. This is what Johnny Harris says.
They listen to a pitch from this Italian sailor, and this sailor wants them to fund his new startup called What If We Sailed West to Get to Asia instead of East? Super promising name.
Okay, I actually kind of like that joke. And he is right. The world did look like this. There were maps around from people that thought Asia was really close by. Take this map from Toscanelli. It shows Japan within reach. Columbus used this and other calculations to say Japan is only 2,500 sea miles away, whereas in reality it's more like 10,000. Columbus was actually cherry-picking proof, and even though these maps existed, the general consensus still was that people didn't think you could reach Asia by sailing west. It was just too far away, and they were totally right.
So Spain was like, yes, great idea, high risk, high return, do it, Columbus.
Columbus put his findings before Spanish experts of the court twice, and he was rejected twice. Only the intervention of the Spanish king made it possible for Columbus to get his boats. Probably because they thought, low risk, potential high reward? I mean, this Columbus dude is so sure he's right against all odds. He has a lot of confidence. Okay, now we move on to one of the most contested points for me in this video. And for that, I'm gonna put on my Johnny Harris debunk hat. It's a moment he says, Columbus changes the world, this big epiphany.
And this is where the biggest light bulb moment of the century goes off in this guy's head. Change of plans, boys, says Columbus. We're going to claim this land. Columbus's realization was instead of trading, they could actually just claim land for themselves. And this changed everything. After all, no one was making any resistance. This moment is the foundation upon which all European imperialism grows.
So, Johnny admits in the comments that he totally dramatized this event. I don't know why, because the truth is actually way more interesting than this dramatized version. As many people have said in the comments, his contract actually said he should claim land he encountered, and that he would become some sort of governor of these lands. But even if we cut Johnny some slack for story purposes, he is still wrong. Let me tell you why. Okay, so before Columbus went sailing, there were basically two kinds of colonial expansion that existed. The first was the Portuguese way. You could plug into existing trade routes by showing up, occupying some land, build a fort and trading posts. This is what the Portuguese were doing in Africa. Take the fort of Elmina that they built. They did this because A, there was a lot of resistance from locals, and B, everyone died in the interior of Africa. Seriously, still in the 1800s, up to half of the colonists could die in certain places? That's a fun field trip. The second kind of colonialism is not that well known. Since the early 1400s, Spain had a colonial project going in the Canary Islands. This has been called Europe's first genocide. Over the course of a century, due to Spanish wars and enslavement, the population of the Canary Islands dropped from estimates of 50 to 80,000 to just 1,000 Canary Islanders. The Spaniards faced a lot of resistance, but eventually they made the islands into a plantation economy. Does that sound familiar? This is a thing historians have called a template for Spanish conquests in the New World. So this kind of colonialism already existed when Columbus went to the Indies, and he really didn't care if the people were subjugating to Columbus or you had to conquer them by force. So what did Columbus realize when he was on his first trip? Well, his initial idea when he was sailing out was to plug into existing trade networks, just like the Portuguese did. Remember, his pitch had been he would find the rich Asian cities, the spices, the cloth, the houses with gold roofs. And what did he find of all these things? Nothing. So Columbus actually got nervous. He had to tell his bosses something about this trip. How was he going to make this a successful enterprise? From the initial idea of Portuguese trading posts, he switches to the Spanish style of colonialism that they had developed on the Canary Islands, where they use the locals or import other people to start a plantation economy. So this is the big epiphany, according to Johnny Harris. But it's not something Columbus came up with. It followed from a need to make something of this voyage. It followed from experience of Iberian powers that were already colonizing parts of the world for over a century. This imperialism wasn't developed there and then with Columbus. And it was also not developed in the encounter with the New World. That's because history is almost never decided by big men or women and their ideas. The truth is always more nuanced, and there's always more history to a story. Columbus also definitely never said the following.
Forget trade with the East, said Columbus. There's a bunch of land that we can go take over in the West.
Because he died believing he'd found islands east of Asia. So in his mind, he was in the East. Okay, so after this, Johnny says that Spain and Portugal quickly conquered the empires.
This is how it all started. Under this new paradigm, both empires expanded very quickly, forcing the Spanish and Portuguese languages across the ocean.
And I do want to highlight something here. Johnny doesn't really delve into this, and maybe he will do it later. I want to tell you something about how the Spanish actually became so successful. One important reason that the Spaniards were able to conquer the empires they found so quickly is that they befriended local factions that were angry at the most powerful factions around. The Spanish were really trying to exploit domestic divisions. If you explain this story in a way that the Spaniards didn't really have any help at all, it makes them seem like these powerful European warriors that were destined to take over. It directly feeds into later ideas of the racial superiority of Europeans over all other peoples. And if you do this, you also make these people look like one blob of uncivilized tribes. But these people had allegiances, politics, and agency. They chose to support the Spanish, something that didn't really work out for them in the end, but they chose so themselves. Okay, so my rant is almost over. I am going to tell you why this is all so bad in a bit. But first, I want to compliment Johnny on the start of this series. I saw quite a lot of people in the comments complaining about him as a kind of a social justice warrior, about how conquest and subjugation of people was normal in all of history. This is true, but I still think we have to talk more about European colonialism and the legacy of it, for two reasons. First, the scope, and then the ideology. European powers dominated almost the entire globe. They raped, pillaged, and extracted resources. If China had taken over the world, it would have been equally as bad. But they just didn't. And second is the ideology that with the conquest was spread around the world. People are moral persons, and to kill or enslave another human being, you must dehumanize her. So from the start of the colonial project, European scholars made a very big effort to justify this behavior. Europeans, they knew murder was bad. They knew you had to have a just war. They knew slavery was bad. It was forbidden in Europe. But when it's a whole different kind of person, not human at all, not so civilized, well, then maybe you can enslave them. So people that are now complaining that we're giving too much attention to the European side of things, well, I think after centuries of washing our hands clean of this past, maybe it's time to own up to this and actually really dive into this history. So for this, I applaud Johnny Harris. Still, why does he make this fictionalized, simplified account of history? And why is it such a bad thing? I think Johnny genuinely wants people to get interested in these stories. And you, yes, you, the audience, you like to watch things that are dramatized and flashy. So he finds a way to make it as attractive as possible. But I think he goes too far with the whole storytelling bit. It's a bit ironic that the criticism Johnny has for the news could also be leveled at his work. The news is too flashy, not nuanced enough, and it makes you feel informed. For this piece, cutting the context gives you a worse reading of history. The education niche of YouTube is not like a peer-reviewed paper. It's also not as fictional as Hollywood true stories. I think on YouTube, viewers have an expectation that information is accurate, and many don't have the background, tools, or time to check if it's really the case. And so posting a simplified narrative is maybe the only information people are going to get from a certain subject. So why should he care? Is this all nitpicking and jealousy from a micro-creator? Well, let me tell you a story about something that I know Johnny cares about. It's the origin story of the myth that people thought the world was flat in medieval times.
That's actually a total legend, and I have no idea why I was taught that in elementary school. How did that happen? I actually am genuinely curious. Like, how did that happen?
This myth is mostly the blame of the novelist Washington Irving. He wrote a fictional account of Columbus's travels. Irving really went to school on the storytelling. He puts down Columbus as a great visionary, a man that has to fight against Catholic clergy at the Spanish courts. The book is ridiculously popular. 175 editions were printed in the 1800s. But Irving presented this story as the struggle of scientific method against medieval religious backwardness. And this epic struggle has such an impact on his contemporaries, it soon morphs into a belief. These clerics thought the world was flat. Eventually, his historical fiction becomes a historic fact that persists to this day.
If some of these folks were around when Columbus set sail, they must have been founding members of the Flat Earth Society. They would not have believed that the world was round.
Let's be clear, Johnny is not as bad as Irving. But a story like that makes sure that myths about history are born. This idea that Irving put forward soon became the idea that medieval people were all stupid. And when history is used to present myths that explain the modern world, we should be very wary. Okay, one last thing before we go. Johnny, if you ever see this, please, please, please start citing sources. It gives more accountability. It can be a starting point for people to read more about a certain subject. It can help academics that write books to do more research. That can eventually be an inspiration for your videos. Okay, rant off. I made this video by using different sources. They are in the description. YouTubers Imperial and Faultline gave feedback on the script. All mistakes are of course still mine. Don't forget to check out their channel. I definitely didn't touch upon everything that was wrong with the video. So let me know in the comments what I missed, and be sure to check out my content, which I try to make as truthful as possible. See ya.
Hi. Everything I'm about to say is true.
Tell me if this sounds familiar. As intelligent animals become smarter and come together, a deadly contagion begins to spread across the world from their home with a 90% fatality rate. This pushes the military to invade the animal's home and viral hotspot, hoping to stop the plague from spreading from these intelligent beasts. It sounds like the plot to Planet of the Apes, but it's a true story. They just got the wrong animal. In the late 80s, deep in the caves of Mount Elgon in East Africa, it wasn't apes who were beginning their own culture. It was elephants. Today, we're looking at the amazing intelligence of elephants, the virus in their home that threatens humanity, and what it might look like if elephants were the only intelligent animals left. We all know elephants are smart, but what if they became even more intelligent? Specifically, when humans are out of the picture. What cultures might arise, and what technologies would they invent?
Grab a couple snacks, because this is going to be a long video about elephant facts, how they might replace us, what they would need to evolve if they were to become sapient, and what that would mean for the world.
Part 1. How would elephants replace us? This is the Marburg virus. It causes hemorrhaging, fever, diarrhea, loss of organ function, and death from dehydration. There's no vaccine for Marburg, and the CDC, WHO, and NIAID all call it an extremely dangerous threat to humanity, an untreatable disease. COVID-19 has a 1.4% mortality rate. Tuberculosis has 40%. Marburg is so deadly that during its worst outbreak, it killed 90% of infected. The most recent outbreak was last year. But what does this have to do with elephants? In the 80s, after multiple deaths, an expedition was staged by the U.S. Army Medical Research Institute of Infectious Diseases in an attempt to find the source, which they believe to be hiding within the shadowed Khatum caves of Mount Elgon. These events have been highly dramatized in literature and sci-fi, but it still happened. In 2007, it was discovered that bats were the source of this zoonotic virus. People were getting sick by inhaling bat guano in the air of Khatum caves, becoming the host for a deadly pathogen once they left Mount Elgon. As the source of Marburg and Ebola, the two most deadly diseases on Earth, Katoom Cave is now known as the most deadly place on Earth. But to elephants, it's a valued place of sanctuary and ritual. Elephants have been migrating hundreds of miles to take their children and give birth within the seemingly sacred place of rejuvenation. Elephant mothers teach their calves in the dark how to mine the mountain of its life source, precious salt. Digging for the nutritious mineral with their tusks, they've marked the walls with scratches over generations, so much so that they've dug the tunnels deeper, expanding the cave network. And they've been performing this ritual for centuries. Here their social bonds are stronger, trusting each other in the dark, and the added minerals to their diet make these herds more likely to pass down healthier, stronger, and smarter descendants. To them, the cave is their future, but to us, it is our doom.
Elephants are conscious, emotional, intelligent beings with complex societies.
Elephants can remember every individual in their herd, even elephants they only met once by sight and smell. They can call to each other and eavesdrop on other herds with infrasound. Elephants have more neurons than humans, most of them dedicated to memory, social communication, and smell, able to tell the difference between two compounds by one molecule. They can understand basic arithmetic, tracking the amount of fruits in baskets after multiple changes, use tools, they engineer their ecosystems, they outwit researchers, have their own syntax and grammar, and use specific calls to each other like names. Elephants show their emotional depth and intelligence most when they have funerals for their dead. Elephants are perfect the way they are, and they don't have to become smarter. But what if they did become more intelligent? Marburg virus is deadly to humans, apes, monkeys, and pigs.
Remember that pig? It's important. We'll get back to it later.
The population of Africa is predicted to double by the year 2050. Given that outbreaks happen more often with climate change and population density, this might be the perfect year for the Marburg virus to spread around the world. This is a diagram of a prediction that two scientists laid out for what it would take for humans to go extinct. If there is a global pandemic of an aggressive version of the Marburg virus, this extinction event might happen even faster. But not as fast as elephants are going extinct.
Elephants can't live long enough to become sapient if they go extinct, which scientists say might happen in the year 2100. So how might they survive? It's without us.
It's not uncommon for animals to come back from the brink of extinction. If we consider how quickly other large mammals have come back from the brink of extinction, we might apply this and predict how elephants can bounce back too. Because of poaching, elephant herds have lost their elder matriarchs who knew where water holes are during droughts. For male herds that are victims of poaching, juveniles can be more aggressive. Another side effect of poaching is that elephant orphans have become shorter every generation. Combine this with the fact that because of climate change, generations of mammals have to become shorter and smaller to conserve nutrients, which is happening right now to frogs, deer, and cattle. Although unrelated to the Lilliput effect, where after mass extinctions, animals just get smaller, we might find that in order to survive, elephants might become dwarfs. A new species of dwarf elephants might be the only ones to survive climate change. After the Marburg pandemic wreaks havoc on the world, humans, apes, and pigs might be wiped out. This open niche left by pigs might be filled by these dwarf elephants. It's not uncommon in extinctions for pig-like animals to survive the best. Adopting a similar lifestyle might also enhance their intelligence. According to some studies, elephant brains have gotten larger in the past every time there's a dramatic shift in climate. And just like elephants, pigs are incredibly social, have a high capacity for memory, they use tools in the wild. Researchers have found that pigs can learn how to play video games, and they are incredibly invasive and resistant to human populations fighting them off. During a future catastrophic Marburg outbreak, elephants might have enough respite from poachers to bounce back from extinction. But could elephants shrink fast enough before their rate of population declines? Because of climate change, elephants without proper upbringing are shrinking by 13 to 14 centimeters every generation. Compare this to the dwarfing of other animals in the past as well as animals in the present, we might have a good idea of when elephants reach the same size as the adaptive pigs they're trying to fill the niche of. Climate change has also pushed elephants to have shorter terms of pregnancy. In the future, this may line up with the fertility rate of African bush pigs. Even if we round up and compare it to the speed of dwarfing and insular dwarfism within 1,000 to 1,500 years from now, we may find a new adaptive pygmy elephant inhabiting areas with dense vegetation and proximity to water sources such as rivers and swamps. These smarter and more hardy dwarf elephants of the bush could have the dual abilities of elephants today mixed with the adaptable intelligence of pigs. Smaller elephants with larger brains has happened before in the past. P. falconeri is a small mammoth that adapted to small island living off the coast of Italy. Most recent studies shows that their brain size to body ratio is comparable to dolphins.
I just think that's crazy. I don't think that they were sapient and have their own societies on an island in Italy. We need more fossils to figure that out. I just think it's a cool fact.
They may change foraging pattern based on dangers. They could use other animal burrows, use complex puzzle solving skills from digging and burrowing for food, with long-term memory and comprehending symbolic language. They may survive drastic climate change in refugiums called sky islands, similar to bush pigs, which have been found at 4,000 meters on Mount Kilimanjaro. Dwarfed elephants and mammoths in the past have also lived on mountains and become more agile with more flexible joints, allowing them to easily scale steep cliffs. At one point, sea otters and Eurasian beavers, both tool-using mammals, were at the brink of extinction, and then their populations bounced back. Industrious dwarf bush elephants might have similar results. One of the final steps in the simulation of humanity's extinction is a series of long volcanic eruptions. Most volcanic region in Africa is the Great Rift Valley. This beautiful and violent ecosystem is actively ripping Africa apart. As the region becomes more volcanic and treacherous, only the dwarf elephants may survive its rage. The volcanic region will become more violent over the course of millions of years. 5 to 6 million years from now, it may die down and become a beautiful vast chasm and set the scene for future elephants' new kingdom. Thanks to their ability to pass down generational knowledge and their long-term memory, they may continue to visit Mount Elgon. Here at the heart of the insular refugium for dwarf elephants is the beginning of their Stone Age. Volcanic soil often acts as great fertilizer for farming and agriculture. An advanced knowledge of water from their industriousness in creating ravines and watering holes may push them to create cisterns and protect water sources in their new arid region, similar to human carved out cave settlements, where water is key to survival. But just like humans, their Stone Age won't be the end of their evolution. Part 2. How might elephants evolve further? An intelligent species is not the end goal of evolution. Evolution doesn't have an end goal. Animals simply adapt certain features to their environment. One of elephants' most unique features is their communication through infrasound. They hear these inaudible sounds through fat pads on their feet using bone conduction. They literally feel each other's voices. They even hear natural sources of infrasound, like thunderstorms, helping them predict rainfall after long droughts. Many animals today that use unique communication can sense their environment, hunt food, and think together through a shared synchronized sensorium, whether using echolocation or electricity. Elephants today can eavesdrop on other herds miles away, and when researchers artificially created warning calls, collectively responded together. Could this unique trait specialize in elephants in the future, creating a shared experience of their environment or even their thoughts? In humans, sensing sound through touch is a form of synesthesia, and maybe the closest we get to how they understand their environment. What if we took all the unique traits of elephants and took them to the furthest extent? Instead of evolving sapients, they may just adapt their most unique traits and specialties to better suit their environment. One problem I have with imagining future sapient elephants is most artists and authors speculate they would evolve hands on their trunks. This is based on the fact that African elephants have 2 fingertips at the end of their nose.
Proboscideans have had the same trunk for millions of years, basically the same layout. I don't think that they'll evolve hands on their nose.
In nature today, animals with prehensile tails and proboscis have relatively bland tips. Why would they evolve fingers? One reason might be using dexterous nodules at the end of their nose to find tubers and roots. The likely adaptation, because elephants are excellent swimmers, is specialized hairs adapted into sensitive organs. In aquatic animals, elephant trunks are like Swiss Army knives. They can pick up heavy objects, but also be delicate. If they became more specialized for delicate manipulation, we might find that elephants protect these sensitive organs as they adapt to colder climates. The only reason animals have adapted proboscis on their face to have fingers is for carnivory and hunting. Maybe in a frozen future, a worm-like tentacle with fingers, sensitive hairs, and teeth rummage through undergrowth, scavenging for anything it can get its hands on. But if we want to predict realistic adaptations for a sapient species, what tools do elephants have today that they can specialize for a diet found in animals with curiosity and sociality? One of the coolest things about elephants that not a lot of people know is that they have a secret sixth toe adapted to supporting their body weight. Extra digits found in other animals are often adapted to helping them get food. Elephants have been known to eat nutritious metals and vitamins found in termite mounds. An accidental adaptation to insectivory might help elephants fill the niche left by gorillas, now extinct from the Marburg virus. The sixth toe in elephants today supports their massive body weight, but our smaller dwarf elephants might adapt it for digging and collecting plants. But would this mess up their ability to hear each other? It might actually be the opposite, since other animals that use bone conduction flatten themselves against the ground in order to better hear. Other animals that dig and strip leaves for food protect their claws and hands by evolving the unique feature of knuckle walking. Elephant locomotion today has all the right puzzle pieces to adapt something similar, especially if they want to protect their new thumbs, bone conducting feet, and the only sweat glands on their body. This has happened to other ungulates. At the risk of sounding anthropocentric, elephants are far more likely to evolve specialized hands instead of fingers on their nose. For now, let's nickname these hypothetical elephants with 6 toes Sita, from the Swahili word for six. Their adaptive diets allows them to forage through multiple environments like dry forests, savanna woodlands, and jungles. The most successful wild pigs of Africa were the omnivorous warthogs, who have similar lifestyles to elephants today, with males and females creating their own herds. It would also lend credence to the knuckle walking hypothesis, as warthogs kneel down to graze and dig for bulbs with their tusks. With arms taking on the roles of heavy lifting, their trunks may adapt for more articulate manipulation of objects and tools. The sixth thumb could be used in defense and as a sexual display. This would bring about a philosophy of balance in future Sita society. But just like humans had Homo erectus, a following species more specific to intelligence and sociality would evolve just like Homo sapiens. With smaller muscles but bigger brains, they would have to rely on each other, their society, and invention to survive in the new kingdom of sapient elephants. Based on what we know about elephants and wild pigs, how would they manipulate their environment to their needs? And how would that influence their civilization? Part 3. What would elephant society look like? If you've made it this far through the video, you probably skipped or you've just gone over a billion science facts about elephants. So taking what we know, what can we hypothesize elephants will create in the future based on what they create today?
There's already an invisible world only seen by elephants that we can't even perceive.
When elephants from different herds meet up, they can tell a lot about each other from their appearance and their smells. Elephants are the #1 animal with the most neurons dedicated to smell. It's the main way they perceive the world. The Sita might take this to a new level, seeing pillars of light and color through synesthesia, pointing the way to watering holes, trails left by other herds, and vast pastures to graze on. Even more impressive is the invisible landscape of fear, where animals change their behavior based on risk of predation, creating a psychological map of their geographic surroundings. We may see a large open pasture, but to wiser elephants, they may see blaring mental roadmaps and warning signs. Their shared field of sensitivity and infrasound, mixed with their brains dedicated to long-term memory, means that the Sita might have a shared experience of an invisible mental map. Elephants are also ecosystem engineers and adapt their environments to their needs, digging watering holes, creating huge trenches, and clearing vast pastures of woods. If we apply this behavior to our mountainous dwarf elephants, they could accidentally create ditch gardens that collect condensation and seeds from their dung to create vast crops. Within the caves of Mount Elgon, elephants scratching at walls actually creates new pillars of stalactites, which bats use as roosts. With the capacity for abstract concepts like art, elephants might find beauty in creating these pillars within their ever-growing and deepening cave systems, creating an alien architecture of scratches and stalagmites. Since the Sita have adapted more to a wild pig lifestyle, it's interesting to know that wild pigs in the winter create igloos out of their burrows and dens. If the Sita mostly live in African caves, we can imagine tropical jungle igloos of stone. Staircase structures would protect them from flash floods, and pillars of salt from Mount Elgon might be considered sacred. Another application of their wild pig igloos could be natural rain catchers as well as natural air conditioning. Now that they won't have to stick to caves anymore, fruit-eating bats might follow them if they become dependent on the Sita for roosting and eating leftovers, finding homes in abandoned Sita towers much like pigeon towers. Their propensity to mine and dig might lead to a jumpstart in forging technologies, leading to a Bronze Age, since their brick igloos seem similar to the Vietnamese brick kilns. It's possible that future Sita might use their stone igloos as forges to create new and inventive technology for agriculture and architecture. One interesting application of domed architecture is the acoustic effects of whispering galleries. If the Sita share a mindscape and mental map of memory between each other with infrasound, they could apply this to their cave systems to gossip about other herds. As tunnels become deeper through mining, injuries are more likely to happen. But these intensely communal and empathetic elephants may try and help in any way they can, creating prosthetics. The females raise young and pass down memories, while males create fraternities that scientists say are very similar to mafias in that they have rituals and rules. Elephants cover themselves in mud as sunscreen, and may use intense colors as a form of fashion. Speaking of clothes, what would their armor look like? With similar adaptations as wild boars, they may try to protect the vital areas that are their weak points, although they won't wear anything heavy on their backs due to how their spine is located. While their cultures become more complicated, males' sense of competition may still linger. Fighters may use similar instruments as rapiers and bucklers while covering their tusks and thumb daggers to not fatally wound their opponents. But beyond small communities and cultural trends, what would their influence on the world be like? Part 4. Elephants are not solitary creatures, so while elephants might become expert craftsmen, their entire economy may be based on nomadism. Nomadic cultures have created stone architecture before. The Nabateans created Petra, the Mongols created Karakoram, and the Sita may have a procession or parade of merchants and ironsmiths traveling along a single road through coastal villages because of their ability to plan ahead and long-term memory. The Sita may have the patience to create ecological engineering projects, one example being the flooding of the Congo, proposed by the architect Hermann Sorgel. But their greatest achievement may be finding a ruin of humans' past. Shielded from the elements by the Saharan sand dunes, the pyramids of Giza are predicted to survive millennia. Architects recently proposed that we add to the Egyptian pyramids a water generator. Again, this appreciation for long-term planning and architecture may push the Sita to build a water generator within the desert, expanding upon it and creating a greenhouse. Attracted to the pyramid because of its size and its astronomical alignment, their most enlightened scientists may also find that the Great Pyramids, under the right resonance frequencies, can concentrate.
I don't know. Seems like
hey
a
guys,
little
thanks
yappy.
for joining me for another episode of The Comment Section. I'm Reagan Conrad. We have a doozy of an episode today. The women who have come out on the losing end of the election cycle have decided to take their rage and aim at the look and appearance of the women on the other side. It's funny because they speak out of both sides of their mouths. They scream about female empowerment always, but then they are the first ones to try and stomp on the women who are true examples of boss babes when those women happen to think much differently than they do. Enter the latest new TikTok trend on the left. What is conservative girl makeup? And am I accidentally wearing it? It's giving drained. Liberal TikTok users are mocking conservative girl makeup. Trump staffers need a beauty blender. Conservative girl makeup trend sparks upset. And here is The Guardian trying to paint the picture so that you guys have a little bit of a better understanding. Their explanation is hilarious to me. Somewhere in the wilderness, in a top secret location, there is an underground lab where normal women go in and Fox News hosts come out. It's called the makeup chair when you're a host on a show. but it's some seriously, it's some crazy thing. I'll continue. Their hair gets dyed an approved shade of blonde before getting snipped, longish, and styled wavy-ish in exactly the same way. I have a bad look going on today as I'm reading this. They are fitted from one big Stepford Wives wardrobe and then heavily made up. All over the U.S., right-wing women emulate this look, creating an army of conservative
Guardian. I
clones.
was going to say,
Obviously,
what
I
is
am being
this, a
hyperbolic.
Salon article?
Republican women don't look exactly the same. The occasional brunette is tolerated, even celebrated. Melania Trump has done wonders for diversity. You're so funny. Nevertheless, the fact that many conservatives, men and women, seem to look and dress eerily alike, almost as if they are in a weird cult, is hard to ignore. When I first read this, I laughed because we are the ones that look cultish? Are you kidding me? I'm not going to get into the details of the leftist looks because I don't want to be at their level. It's not politically correct for these outlets to dissect the far leftist female attire, consisting of multi-hair colors, microbangs, and every pin and flag on their colorful outfits.
President Trump is pushing forward on two very big foreign policy plans to end one war.
He's also working to stabilize a peace deal in another war. Erica Brown with more today from the White House.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio met with the Saudi Crown Prince Monday to discuss peace deals to end the wars in both Gaza and Ukraine. This is Rubio's first Middle East visit as Secretary of State as he seeks support for President Trump's controversial plan to resettle Palestinians so the U.S. can redevelop Gaza. Rubio met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu over the weekend, and a bipartisan group of senators was in Israel Monday.
The one thing that President Trump has done, he started a discussion that was long overdue. I think the Arabs have woken up, hey, we need to find a better alternative than what's been said.
The Trump plan is a non-plan. It's a hot mess. The possibility of takeover by the United States is a non-starter.
Rubio and other Trump administration officials are expected to meet with Russian officials in Saudi Arabia Tuesday for talks to end Russia's war with Ukraine. Ukraine is pushing for a more active role in negotiations.
Україна про це нічого не знала.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said his country was not invited, and any deal made without Ukraine will not be recognized.
Як?
European leaders who have been shut out of negotiations met in an emergency session in Paris Monday.
This isn't just about the front line in Ukraine, it's the front line of Europe and of the United Kingdom. It's about our national security.
UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer said he was willing to put British troops on the ground in Ukraine to help enforce a peace deal.
Prime Minister Starmer is expected to meet with President Trump in Washington next week.
I'm Kristi Noem, the United States Secretary of Homeland Security. Thank you, President Donald J. Trump, for securing our border, for deporting criminal illegal immigrants, and for putting America first. President Trump has a clear message for those that are in our country illegally. Leave now. If you don't, we will find you, and we will deport you. You will never return. For too long, weak politicians left our borders wide open. They flooded our communities with drugs, human trafficking, and violent criminals. They put American lives at risk. Well, those days are over. If you leave now, you may have an opportunity to return and enjoy our freedom and live the American dream. But understand this. Under President Trump, America's borders are closed to lawbreakers. Follow the law, and you'll find opportunity. Break it, and you'll find consequences. The choice is yours. America welcomes those who respect our laws, because a strong nation is a safe nation.
This furry potato looks an awful lot like a rodent. It's got the general size and shape of your typical marmot. It has incisors that keep growing for its entire life like a rodent, and heck, could those whiskers lie? But at the mammal family reunion, you won't find the hyrax sitting by the groundhogs and the chinchillas of the world. Instead, its closest relatives hint at something much weirder going on in its evolutionary history. Because its actual cousins are elephants and sea cows. And we're not sure which is closer. If you want to support the channel, the Bizarre Beast Pin Club is open for subscriptions for the whole month. Sign up by June 20th and the first pin you will get will be one of these incredible fuzzy potatoes. And stick around for the end of the video for some bonus Hyrax facts. There are 6 or 7 extant species of Hyraxes, depending on who you ask, and they can be found in the Middle East and throughout much of Africa. They may look cute, but they can sound truly horrible. Some Hyrax species are solitary and live in trees, while others live socially in groups on rock outcrops. And like a lot of animals their size, they eat plants and bugs. So far, nothing really out of the ordinary here. But before we get into their bizarre family tree, we gotta say that Hyraxes have some noteworthy weirdness all their own. As a diurnal species, they can often be found basking in the sun. But this isn't just a comfort thing. They're actually not great at regulating their internal body temperature, so they need that extra solar boost to stay warm. Luckily, they have an easy time climbing and clinging to nice sunny spots thanks to their suction cup feet. The muscular structure of their foot pads combined with some fancy gland secretions help them grip onto surprisingly steep and smooth surfaces. Hyraxes also don't eat like most other animals. Their front teeth may at first glance look like gnawing incisors used by rodents, but they're actually simple tusks used for display and for grooming. So they have to turn their heads sideways to bite with their molars. Teeth that scientists at one point thought more closely resembled those of rhinos and horses, and then chew normally. From there, things go right back to strange again when the food makes its way to their unique multi-chambered digestive system that ferments with the help of microbes, a lot like in cows and other ruminants. But unlike true ruminants, Hyraxes don't regurgitate a cud to continue chewing. Their digestive system is one way. And because they live in such dry habitats, Hyraxes also have pretty efficient kidneys that help them conserve water. This means that their urine is extra concentrated when nature finally calls, and it quickly dries into something resembling molasses. Social Hyrax species often use middens, effectively common bathroom mounds, to do their business, creating mountains of pee crystals that fossilize over time. And fossilized Hyrax waste is so abundant and unique that it even gets its own special mineral name, hyraceum. Fossilization of this thick, quick-drying urine can also capture environmental data, like atmospheric radioisotopes and airborne pollen. You can think of it as a less glamorous version of the insect in amber effect. So while colder regions can use ice cores as time capsules for studying climate change, South Africa gets to use huge piles of fossilized Hyrax pee. All of this is weird and wild enough, but let's get back to the common ancestor of the elephant in the room. What is the deal with Hyrax taxonomy? They look like rodents, they digest sort of like ruminants, they chew with teeth like horses, they have incisors that are kind of like tusks, so where in the mammal family tree do they fit in? By looking at bones and later at proteins, scientists have concluded that the Hyraxes belong in a clade called Penungulata, literally almost ungulates. This group is comprised of the orders Proboscidea, elephants, Sirenia, manatees and dugongs, and Hyracoidea, our friends the Hyraxes. The penungulates likely arose roughly 65 million years ago, when mammals really started to go nuts after the dinosaurs were gone. And although grouping these 3 orders together has been pretty agreed upon since the mid-20th century, figuring out how exactly each order is related to the other 2 has been messy. Comparisons using anatomy, amino acids, and different gene sets have each given contradictory answers. Even with the help of increasingly sophisticated DNA tools, we still don't have a totally clear answer as to which of the 3 orders branched off when. In other words, between Hyraxes, elephants, and sea cows, we still can't really tell who's more closely related to whom. Right now, there is basically equal molecular evidence supporting any of the 3 possible arrangements. Hyracoidea could have split off first from Proboscidea and Sirenia. Sirenia could be an outgroup to Proboscidea and Hyracoidea, or Hyracoidea and Sirenia could be more closely related to each other than to Proboscidea. And the persistence of this uncertainty makes it very possible that this specific case is an example of a polytomy. A polytomy is when speciation occurs not as a two-way branching event on a phylogenetic tree, but as a simultaneous branching of 3 or more species from the same common ancestor. Usually Usually, this is simply a placeholder in an evolutionary tree until we can figure out which species branched off first, which is a scenario called a soft polygamy. But it is possible for a three-way species radiation to be, for all intents and purposes, truly simultaneous, or a hard polygamy. And chromosomal evidence suggests
Hard
that radiation
polygamy.
among the Penangulata orders took 4 to 7 million years, and the latest genetic analyses suggest that this radiation began from an honest-to-goodness hard polygamy. So hyraxes don't just have surprising relatives, their speciation represents a rare evolutionary occurrence as well. And to cap it off, according to some researchers, these screaming teddy bears may also have an aquatic background. Red blood cells contain the protein hemoglobin, which transports oxygen and iron throughout the body. Mussels contain a similar molecule called myoglobin, and animals that dive deep underwater and hold their breath for a long time tend to have high concentrations of extra positively charged myoglobin molecules in their muscles. The positive charge causes the molecules to repel each other, allowing myoglobins to be highly concentrated in the muscles without sticking together and becoming useless. And this extra myoglobin helps diving animals maximize their oxygen usage until they can get another breath. Hyraxes and elephants have this same telltale pattern of more myoglobin than most terrestrial animals, and extra charged myoglobin in their muscles. It's not as extreme as it is in, say, modern whales, but it is significantly higher than in species with strictly terrestrial mammal ancestors. Because scientists have yet to pinpoint the exact nature of the evolutionary branching of the penungulates, we can't say for sure who this past aquatic common ancestor was. But all signs point to proboscideans, sirenians, and hydrocoideans descending from one of the earliest known placental mammals to become underwater specialists. You might see a weird, rock-hopping guinea pig-looking critter today, but appearances alone don't tell a fraction of the long and storied history in play here. So the evidence is in. Hyraxes definitely are not rodents, and definitely are the way cool descendants of a common, possibly aquatic ancestor of elephants and sea cows. And their superficial similarities to rodents can be chalked up to convergent evolution. Occupy the same ecological niche long enough, and you'll eventually end up with unrelated species who share similar adaptations. The confusion about the Hyraxes lineage is a reminder that taxonomy, for all of its structure and rules, is at the end of the day a human construct. We love to understand the world around us, what things are and where they come from, but our tools for answering these questions always have limits. And as those tools become increasingly sophisticated, we can potentially solve more of these evolutionary mysteries, making beasts like the Hyrax seem less bizarre to us. Don't forget to sign up for the Pin Club at bizarrebeastshow.com by June 20th if you want to get one of these little potato guy pins. And now for some bonus facts. Okay, Hyraxes are just so weird that we couldn't fit all of their weirdness into the main part of the video, so here are a couple of bonus facts. We mentioned that Hyraxes aren't great at regulating their own body temperatures, so along with basking in the sun, rock Hyraxes will also do a behavior called heaping to keep warm. And that's pretty much exactly what it sounds like. The Hyraxes will pile themselves together in a furry little stack in the den to conserve body heat, which sounds adorable, to be honest. Hyraxes also have relatively long gestation periods for mammals of their size, something like 6 to 8 months. And it's been suggested that this is just an evolutionary leftover from their ancestors, many of whom were much bigger, up to rhino-sized.
Oh my god, imagine a Wawa that's the size of a rhino.
Oh, hello there. So, just a warning, because I know this is going to be, a little bit political in nature.
Could be
People don't
louder.
like that stuff, and I tend to keep it, to my personal Twitter account and on the streams, but I don't really put it, in video form on Reckless Eating. And also, I'm going to be huffing puffing because I'm out hiking right now. But I wanted to talk to you guys about something and see what you guys think about this topic, because something's really bothered me lately, and that is the fact that it seems to be a little bit of a movement going right now of people who are actively asking for or fine with having a dictatorship in the United States of America, which I personally find vile. I think that's disgusting. And I say that, you know, it doesn't matter.
Could be louder.
What your political ideology is. I don't care if you're left, right, independent, you know, center, moderate. It doesn't matter to me. I mean, people can believe whatever the hell they want. That's one of the things that makes this place great. And it truly bugs me because I'm 40 years old. I've been following politics since 2016.
You know, I've seen some people suggesting that right now the total number of people who are being let go from the federal government is numbering in the ballpark of 250,000. Because apparently some number of people, allegedly from the Trump administration, like some number around 50, 60,000 have taken the buyout. And a large number of federal workers were probationary. So they were only there for a few years and they're easier to fire. Yeah. 65,000 if I recall correctly, of the buyout. And then in addition to that, there's the probationary workers. Getting pretty wacky. The HR manager noted that he voted for Trump in the last 3 elections and will never make that mistake again. That's great, man. You know, I really appreciate it when people have their come to Christ moment right when it's needed. That's great. This one rules. Donald J. Trump, hello, sir. I am one of the probationary employees terminated by the Doge at 9 p.m. last night, February 14th. I voted for you, sir, 3 times, and I still support you, of course. I was encouraged by the Doge to see they were getting rid of wasteful government spending. I support that too. My termination letter said I was being let go for performance reasons. I know that's not true. I am an excellent employee. I've been with the federal government. It's sad, isn't it? It's really, really, really sad. Like, so many of these people live desperate, stupid lives, like animals grazing on a field, you know? With not enough grass to go around. And they're so amped up on the idea, like, don't worry, the targeted cruelty will be directed at everyone but me. I might be poor. I might be relying on federal assistance. I might have Medicaid. I might be relying on Social Security. But when they talk about all these things, you know, they're talking about the other ones, the other undeserving ones. Like, Elon was literally tweeting, like, referring to everyone on Medicaid benefits as the parasite class 2 days ago. It was like a meme, and it was like, me when I see Doge cutting waste, but I'm not mad because I'm not a member of the parasite class, and it's like 1/3 of the country relies on entitlements in some form or another. Yeah, everyone thinks they're a special snowflake. It's destructive individualism. They don't understand, like, you are the traffic, mother. You're the traffic. You're the bloat they're talking about. They were always talking about you. I've been with the federal government for almost 16 years. 16 years in June. I had started my career with USDA, transferred to DHS, and recently came back to USDA because it's such a great agency to work for. Surely that must count for something in your eyes. I'm loyal and I firmly believe that the work I do as a USDA APHIS PPQ employee, sure, I believe you, is vital and important. My boss, his boss, the managers in neighboring states all agree I'm doing an excellent job and that I'm a great asset to the team. I'm the only blank here in the state of Kentucky, and my work here is valued and honorable. Each time I voted for you, it was because I knew you'd make things right and you'd fix the wrongs. I'm counting on you now to make this right too. I'm pleading with you to reinstate my employment and give me my job back. Please, Mr. President, thank you. President Donald J. Trump, First Lady Melania Trump, Donald Trump Jr., U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service. Sir, my lord, my lord. Again, it's what I mean about Americans not having the sauce. This, like, rampant individualism. Nobody understands what it means to give your life to the state. You want fascism, mother? Well, welcome to fascism, okay? Your life is nothing. Like, you are an interchangeable cog in a series of machines that have your interests in mind, and they do the opposite of them. Your interests are in their mind. They're just acting directly against it. You know, you're the enemy, basically. The Americans of today could have never broken from the British Empire. That is true, though it is worth remembering, of course, that the American Revolution was spurred mostly by, like, you know, greedy, individualism-minded American landed gentry. But, you know, all the same,
what?
Yes.
What?
They weren't not willing to make sacrifices.
What?
We're not the country that landed on the moon anymore. I think that's true. I genuinely do. I think that the difference between modern-day America and America of 1969
greedy
is
is when you want representation in government
and Russia
I guess.
today. or America today and Turkey today, or America today and China today. I think that, like, the modernity has bled from America every drop of exceptionalism that might have been warranted by our existence as a superpower. You know? Like, not moral exceptionalism, mind, but, like, in performance. The sauce is gone, dude. It's a dead country. The 80s was the sauce reduction. Yes, yes. Obviously, Reagan spurred a great many of the... Yeah, yes. You know. At least everyone's having their little moment, you know? In private conversations, some Wall Street executives go much further. One senior investment banker says the disorder and unpredictability of Trump's actions and those of Elon Musk, the billionaire Tesla chief who has become one of his most senior lieutenants, was greater than anticipated. With hindsight, we do not appreciate the nature of what the administration was going to be like, the banker says. I do believe they are hurting their stated objectives of peace and prosperity. That's great,
nerd.
man. We'll see how long things keep up, you know? Public opinion is going to turn against Donald Trump. It's already begun to. If you go by the polling, which I don't, youth opinion of him has decreased substantially. I don't know if I believe that at all. I do know, though, that there's like an inevitable... There is an unavoidable slope to this. Whether or not that amounts to anything, I can't say. But we still have 4 years, man. Whoa, hold on. At least 4 years. Let's not... Nah, he literally can't lose support. These people are in a cult. There's some truth to that, but keep in mind that the more cult-like people are the ones that you see online. There are a lot of people who are just stupidly swept up in it. It's not literally 1/3 of the population of the country is in a diehard cult. It's probably more like 10% of them are, and the remaining 2/3 of the Trump constituency are just like varying levels of stupid and ignorant and hateful, but not necessarily to that level of the cult. You know, I don't know. I'm just ballparking it. I'm gay. I'm not good at math. I'm just doing boy math, exactly. What makes Curtis Yarvin and his moron followers like Peter Thiel think they can become kings, let alone survive a superpower like China? Well, they're dumb. Look, the arrogance of like very powerful people, this is like a studied historical phenomenon, okay? Like you're very powerful, no one tells you no, you get lucky a bunch, you end up on top. Everyone thinks once they reach that position they deserve everything they have, you know? The crazy thing is that it wasn't that long ago that ultra-wealthy people actually did usually have to be some kind of smart, or at least impressive, to get that wealthy. Nowadays, it's just stock market speculation. It's literally luck. Like, past a point, it is just a dice roll, right? There are plenty of people smarter than Elon Musk who might have made their own investment decisions, but PayPal popped off, Tesla popped off, you know? Everything after that was just kind of like a ball rolling down a hill, you know? We're not talking about captains of industry here. We're talking about parasites that sit on top of the system. They're not even making the decisions in the running of the company. Just rolling dice. It's definitely a bubble. Those eggs don't seem to be getting cheaper. I don't think they're going to get cheaper for a while. Thank God I don't eat eggs. If only we could invest in eggs. What was I saying? There are going to be a lot of fell for it again types. And, like, I know... Like, people like this. I don't know, man. Life is just going to get harder and harder and harder, you know? Like, the Trump administration has specifically stated they want to start a recession. Recessions are fine for the wealthy. Keep that in mind. They're fine, okay? Because inevitably, things bounce back. But during a recession, it's harder to get work. Do you have any idea how difficult it's going to be to find a job for the... many federal workers who are getting laid off? How transferable are those skills? You've spent 25 years working at the USDA. Where are you going next? Like, you have a good skill set. Don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not saying that your work is useless. I'm saying how many jobs are there out there that need you? And as people suffer more, they might regret their voting decisions. But suffer they must. I'm an accelerationist now. The suffering is good. Better they suffer in a way that hurts his poll numbers than, I don't know, suffering happen in a way which doesn't hurt his poll numbers. Yippee! Vosh, I don't deserve to suffer, though? Well, you're an American. As am I. It really depends on the skill set. They're going to outsource and privatize everything anyway. Yeah, but they're not going to. Because the private sector is never going to want to replace these jobs. The private sector is never going to build out like a 10,000 person regulatory agency. Vosh, I don't deserve to suffer. In like a private capacity. Like, what would the benefit to them be? You know? What makes an accelerationist now better than being one before? Because I didn't want Trump win, but now that Trump has won, like, it's better that you rip the Band-Aid off cleanly, rather than the suffering be perpetuated indefinitely by an administration that's competent enough to hold itself together while maximizing the blood it constrained from the American people. You can tell the difference, right? Like, I don't know. An administration that can hold itself together while being wretched would be pretty bad. It would be like the world's superpower being that evil to everyone and holding itself together, it would plunge the entire planet into the shit. More so than it already has, which it already has to a large extent. The Munich Security Conference speech has essentially ended the alliance, by the way, at least as it was before. Oh yeah, no, we're basic, like, Europe is essentially on its own. We've essentially told our allies, like, we are, dude, we're literally holding a conference for peace in Ukraine in Saudi Arabia with Russia. Ukraine isn't even invited. Like, we are so, it's so obvious. Honestly, I mean, dispense with the artifice, right? Like, it be straightforward with it at least, you know? Chinese century, now Chinese millennia. Europe should have done a deal with China. I mean, the relations between China and Europe are probably going to strengthen at least a little bit as a consequence of our abandonment of them. What is this, by the way? What is the Javier Milei meme coin? Javier Milei backtracks on 4.4 billion meme coin after insiders pocket 87 million. This is exactly what Trump and Melania did. Or Melania. I always mix them up because of the bitch from
Except they
Ellen
didn't
Ring.
do a rug pull.
He promoted a rug pull that stole 87 million in the first 3 hours. But who cares? He was already an open grifter. Is this like actually, like, who is mad at this that wasn't already mad at him? Half of Argentina is in poverty. I can't wait to never hear about crypto in 10 years. Good luck with that. Argentina's President Javier Milei backtracked on a tweet promoting a meme coin called Libra, which rose to a 4.4 billion market cap before plunging by more than 95%. In a now deleted tweet, Milei initially wrote, "This is a private project dedicated to encouraging the growth of the Argentine economy." This is the difference between Milei and a superpower like the United States. Trump can launch a meme coin that immediately rug pulls, but not even delete the tweets after. You know? Like, it doesn't even matter for him. He can just do it, and then there's no consequence to it. Rose by more than 2,000% in a 40-minute span following the tweet. Crypto influencer Ape lost his fortune after investing in Milei's suggested meme coin and had a meltdown where he threatened to kill Milei. I can never really tell if shit like this is real, because people, when they perform for the camera like this, it's like, are you just trying to make back the money you lost by trying to, like, drive engagement, you know?
I'm broke! I'm broke! I'm gonna find you! I'm gonna find you, devs! I'm gonna find you! You rugged me!
Can somebody explain to me, by the way, what is it with Zoomers and cross necklaces? When did this come back? I know that Catholics historically have worn cross necklaces, but a lot of you mother Catholic, you're just wearing them. Is it just like conservative cultural zeitgeist, like meaning to your porn addiction? I don't know. Conservative LARPing? Yeah.
I have nothing! I have to sell my Rolex! I have to sell it! I have to sell all my shit! And I don't have anything! Against you pieces of shit! You rugged me! You all rugged me, bro! And I'm gonna find you!
Your fault.
I'm gonna...
Your
Yeah,
fault.
this is probably
Literally
fake.
your fault.
What matters, though, is that they're all having fun. Milei later addressed the botched meme coin on X, stating he was not aware of the details of the project. Dude, literally, who cares? Like, he's already the country. I don't know. Maybe I'm being too cynical about this. It's like, what... Like, who... Wouldn't everyone already be mad at him? He did a damn hawk tua. Remembering I can't actually speak Spanish. He probably wants good favor with the crypto bros. Yeah, but rug pulling is all crypto is for. I'm sorry, like, past a point, man. Past a point, you're just in FAFO territory. There are so many people who lose their money for reasons that are more legitimate than that. Like, I don't know. Again, I don't know, man. Come on. You're having your own MAGA moment. Kinda, it's like scamming old people. Maybe they should have tried not being old. I don't know.
But then I was really surprised to see that after their entire complaint, they took it a step further and noted that Turn 14 and companies like it could sue the EPA for damages.
Why am I looking at this?
Because based on how this wording was changed, it would make a lot of their work illegal, which would hurt their business, cause them a loss of business, and then directly allow them to sue the EPA for damages. And then it went even further, and the CEO of Turn 14 himself had a message after the complaint and how they felt like after this new wording, they would be negatively impacted and they would sue the EPA.
How many people in Argentina do you think read the writing on the wall and made a lot of money in Argentina by investing in USD right before Argentina halved the relative value of their currency against the USD, and then bought back into the Argentinian peso, because then they would have like doubled their money immediately, right? Like they would have like insured themselves against the inflationary loss against the USD. Do kids even have homework anymore? Don't kids have like way more homework now than they used to? Because I had like a decent amount of homework when I was a kid, and my parents told me like they didn't have much homework at all. And now I hear that kids nowadays, they have like a load of homework, but they don't do it, yeah. Which is based, because homework is stupid. It's bad.
For damages. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but I feel like that's probably pretty aggressive. If you're going to tell the...
Yeah, I have no idea what is this?
I never thought I'd say that, but I regret my vote. I voted for Trump.
Oh, Ariana Jasmine.
And I regret it now.
I know her.
As a Hispanic, I voted for Donald J. Trump. Dude, I regret it so much, man.
I am regretting my vote for Donald Trump.
I voted for Donald Trump, and now I regret it. A lot of people who were like me voted for Trump.
I need a big mug that I can drink so I can be like cunty when people are suffering. I'm saying this in a positive way. This is not me disparaging. I almost just said Ariana Grande, which would that have been probably...
You won't be surprised to hear, because you may be among them. It turns out the American people don't love watching Donald Trump and Elon Musk take an absolute wrecking ball to the federal government. I mean, today we saw massive protests right here in Washington, D.C., and also all across the country. You can see some of the photos on our screen. We saw protests in big cities and small towns and at state capitals.
Big trains, little trains, steamy trains.
Pissed off people are about what's happening right now. And who could blame them? I mean, we just learned that Elon Musk's Doge crew is trying to get access to personal taxpayer data at the IRS. So basically, the world's richest man and his band of 20-something cronies want access to your personal data. They want access to your tax returns, your addresses, your employment information, your banking details, and your social security numbers. I mean, this is the kind of issue that hits home for all of us. I'm sure it hits home for you, because most of us pay taxes, right? Just like most of us fly in on airplanes. And today, unbelievably, there was another major commercial airline incident. A Delta plane that took off from Minneapolis flipped over when it was attempting to land in Toronto. Nobody was killed, but at least 17 people were injured. And of course, it's just the latest in a series of air incidents since Trump was sworn in. And since an Army helicopter and an American Airlines plane collided right here in Washington, killing 67 people. Well, today, just 19 days after that tragedy, we are also getting new details about the Trump administration's purge of hundreds of critical air safety workers at the FAA. And I'm going to go into more detail also with somebody who knows a lot about it in just a moment. But the larger point is this. Donald Trump and Elon Musk are screwing around with government in all sorts of ways that impact you personally, and in ways that impact our national security and our safety more broadly. And in that process, they are teaching us a whole lot about all of the ways that government actually keeps us safe. For example, I mean, when the U.S. military needs to deploy more nuclear warheads on its planes and submarines to defend us, do you know who actually holds the components for those weapons? Who puts them together, makes sure they're safe, and delivers them to the Pentagon? Well, most of that work is actually done by the same people who also refurbish old nuclear weapons and dismantle the retired ones. And it all happens at one plant on the Sandy Plains outside of Amarillo, Texas, called the Pantex plant. It's where the employees and contractors for the Department of Energy are constantly inspecting and outfitting America's nuclear weapons with high explosives, as well as their cores of highly radioactive uranium and plutonium. All of this highly secretive, highly dangerous work is run by the Department of Energy's National Nuclear Security Administration. They oversee the U.S. nuclear stockpile and its components, not just at Pantex, but at an entire network of plants, labs, and bases across the country. The NNSA does all of that and transports nuclear material on U.S. highways using a highly trained and heavily armed fleet of trucks and vehicles. And this is all overseen by career staff with very, very specific expertise, for some of them decades of it. It's also the sort of government function that we don't think about all the time. I hope you don't think about all the time. But it's always working in the background. It has to work because you can't mess around with the people who handle our nuclear weapons. Well, I mean, at least you thought you can't.
The latest bit of information coming in from the National Nuclear Security Agency, which is tasked with overseeing and building the nation's nuclear weapons stockpile. Their notices have gone out with termination for probationary employees effective immediately.
That's right. So as part of its purge of government employees, Elon Musk and his merry band of young Doge axemen unilaterally fired 350 workers at the agency responsible for safeguarding nuclear arms components. And almost immediately, they realized they'd made a terrible mistake.
NBC News has obtained an email sent to employees of the National Nuclear Security Administration. It says in part the termination letters for some NNSA probationary employees are being rescinded, adding that officials do not have a good way to get in touch with those personnel.
Do not have a good way to get in touch. Okay, that's right. Under Elon Musk's eye, the Trump White House fired a chunk of the NNSA workforce, and one of the hardest hit offices was the Pantex plant that I was just talking about, near Amarillo, Texas. They saw about 30% of the cuts. You know, that's the plant where employees work on reassembling warheads, one of the most sensitive jobs across the nuclear weapons enterprise, with the highest levels of clearance. But now the geniuses who let those employees go can't figure out how to unfire the people who are just locked out of government buildings. And
he was using his gay powers.
Literally can't make it up sometimes. The director of the Arms Control Association told the AP, quote, "The Doge people are coming in with absolutely no knowledge of what these departments are responsible for." So yes, they are messing around with the people who literally handle our nuclear bombs. That's what Donald Trump and Elon Musk are doing. Now, at the same time, the Trump administration is firing hundreds of employees at the FAA, just weeks after the deadliest U.S. air disaster in decades. Those firings reportedly include personnel hired for FAA radar, landing and navigational aid maintenance, as well as a technician who was working on a critical cruise missile defense radar system. Now, as I mentioned, there's already been a spike in serious and fatal crashes since Trump took office, and since the FAA's chief resigned, in accordance with the demands of Elon Musk. And that list doesn't even include the latest. That Delta plane that crash landed and flipped on the runway in Toronto. That flight left from Minneapolis under FAA supervision, though it was being directed at the time of the crash by their Canadian counterparts. Even still, lots of Americans are understandably wondering, you may be too, if Trump's FAA is still able to keep air travel safe, just as more firings of critical air safety personnel are underway. So yes, people are pissed, and it is not hard to see why. And as we watch these protests play out across the country, we're also watching a metaphorical ticking time bomb in a country where we suddenly have to worry about the safety of our air travel and of our literal nuclear bombs. Starting us off tonight is David Spiro. He's the president of the Professional Aviation Safety Specialist Unit. David, thank you so much for taking the time here. I mentioned this, and I know you've probably been answering this question from friends and family as well. And people are understandably a little freaked out right now about air travel, and we're simultaneously seeing all of these layoffs, these firings that are happening under Donald Trump and Elon Musk, as well as what feels like an increase in incidents in the air. I just wonder how you make sense of what's happening, that all happening simultaneously.
Well, thanks for having me on. It's been a difficult few weeks, obviously, and our hearts go out to the passengers on the plane today, the crew, the first responders. Happily, at the moment, there's been no fatalities. So hopefully that stays the way it is. I think that it's important to note that the U.S. air traffic control system is safe, and our members are a key reason why that's the case. We work with integrity, we work with skill, and we have a deep background in how to maintain the air traffic control system and how to oversee it. But as you pointed out, just this past Friday, about 300 folks, 400 people got the axe on St. Valentine's Day, right? Out to dinner and enjoying a nice evening and find out they lost their job. We didn't get any notice from the FAA. At this point right now, we don't know if it's 300, 400, or 1,000. because
so it could be. I just want to pause on that. It could be way more than the 350 that have been reported.
It could be. They haven't told us who it is, and as far as we're concerned, the inspectors and the technicians, we have probationary inspectors and technicians that could possibly have gotten the axe, but we don't know that for certain. All we're getting right now is our members reaching out to us and telling us, hey, I lost my job. And we're talking about people that support the entire air traffic control system by virtue of the support work that they do. So let me start out and talk about aeronautical information specialists. They are a skilled group of people that create charts, navigational processes, a performance-based navigation where aircraft can fly in a lot more efficiently. It takes a long time to develop those skills. There's at least 30 of them that are probationary employees in the FAA that we represent. And quite honestly, if they're gone, who's going to create that product? And the work that our aviation safety assistants do for our inspectors to make sure that they can actually go out and ramp airplanes and check on pilots and airworthiness of aircraft. They do all of that stuff because they have these support groups behind them.
You mentioned some of the skills, and maybe those are the main ones for people to understand. But for people who are watching who aren't experts, for all of these layoffs, and it was already understaffed to begin with, what is the impact on airports and the ability to safely land planes? How should people understand that if these cuts continue?
Well, if these cuts continue, I don't know how far into the bone you can go before you have to start looking at. Let's look at navigational aids or radars or automation systems that air traffic controllers use, communications that they use to get the airplanes up in the air and down to their destination and people there safely. If we don't have the right people with the right skill sets working in these locations, or if they're off doing something else because they don't have that support group anymore, then quite honestly, we're going to have delays. There's always backup systems, but if I don't have the right person in the right place to be able to restore a system like happened in Chicago last year, where we didn't have anyone on duty that could intervene in the automation system, where they were having errors coming through and controllers couldn't tell what the planes were. So we had to stop. We had stops at 5 airports in the Chicago area. That sort of thing is because you don't have the right person in the right place. Now, if we're going to have to leave the work that we do and go off somewhere else to take care of work that someone else was doing for us to make sure that we can do our jobs, then that's going to make it even more difficult.
J.D. Vance's speech at the Munich Security Conference was so deferential to Vladimir Putin that it's leading some to ask, was it written by Kremlin propagandists? We're going to look at a couple of different clips, and as we go into this, the most critical aspect of this to understand is that you can forget about everything Russia-related from 2016 to 2020, right? Put aside the Mueller probe, put aside, just forget about all of it. If we start clean on January 20th, 2025, and we see what this administration has said, postured, and signaled with regard to Russia, Ukraine, you don't even need 2016 to 2020 to make the case that this is an administration that is bowing down to Vladimir Putin's authoritarianism. We already talked about how Trump and others over the last week have sort of all come together to suggest Russia may get to keep some of the territory that it stole. Russia has already lost a lot in this war. Well, they're the aggressors. Russia is going to get what it wants in terms of Ukraine not being a NATO member. It's all what Putin wants. And here's J.D. Vance at the Munich Security Conference talking about how if your democracy is so weak that Russia spending a little money on social media influencing makes a difference, then maybe the problem is not with Russia, but with your democracy, which is another classic way to just implicitly defend Vladimir Putin.
We're at the point, of course, that the situation has gotten so bad that this December, Romania straight up canceled the results of a presidential election based on the flimsy suspicions of an intelligence agency and enormous pressure from its continental neighbors. Now, as I understand it, the argument was that Russian disinformation had infected the Romanian elections. But I'd ask my European friends to have some perspective. You can believe it's wrong for Russia to buy social media advertisements to influence your elections. We certainly do. You can condemn it on the world stage even. But if your democracy can be destroyed with a few $100,000 of digital advertising from a foreign country, then it wasn't very strong to begin with.
And as you can see, 3 people in the crowd really found that to be prescient and insightful. Oh boy. Oh boy. They are just fully bowing down to Putin. Here is more from Vance pulling a classic Trump line, which is, don't come to me about our adversary, Russia. The real threat here is from within, which, once again, is the sitting vice president of the United States. He's standing in this video, but you know what I'm saying. The vice president of the United States saying, I'm more worried about liberals in New York City than I am about our geopolitical authoritarian adversaries. That is terrifying. Listen to this guy.
The threat that I worry the most about vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, it's not China, it's not any other external actor. And what I worry about is the threat from within, the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values, values shared with the United States of America. Now, I was struck that a former European commissioner went on television recently and sounded delighted that the Romanian government had just annulled an entire election. He warned that if things don't go to plan, the very same thing could happen in Germany too. Now, these cavalier statements are shocking to American ears. For years, we've been told that everything we fund and support is in the name of our shared democratic values. Everything from our Ukraine policy to digital censorship is billed as a defense of democracy. But when we see European courts canceling elections and senior officials threatening to cancel others, we ought to ask whether we're holding ourselves to an appropriately high standard. And I say ourselves because I fundamentally believe that we are on the same team. We must do more than talk about democratic values. We must live them.
And of course, he says, on the one hand, we must talk about and live democratic values. But on the other hand, we are saying that Putin and his invading force are going to keep some of the land. They will get what they want in keeping Ukraine out of NATO. They get everything they want from an authoritarian perspective, but we must support democracy, and the democracy must be able to withstand anything Russia does, no matter how authoritarian or even against international law. This is the sort of rhetoric that you typically hear from Moscow. And I know that it's sort of like, wait a second, we're doing this all over again. J.D. Vance and MAGA think that when he gives a speech like that, or he calls out our allies, that he's being really tough. He's actually just being really stupid. You know what? Good negotiators. We've interviewed Chris Voss on the show. We've talked a lot about negotiation on the world stage. Good negotiators will tell you that you have to put your ego aside and that what matters is getting to the best result. How can you get the counterparts to your negotiation to the ideal result for you? MAGA seems to think that when Trump and Vance attack our Democratic allies, go after liberal democracies and insult people and threaten and all of this different stuff, they're being tough and they're being alpha, and that's actually how you succeed because they will see that the United States isn't afraid of. You don't get the best result when people just think you're an uninformed asshole and that you're unhinged. Now, it is of course true that in some circumstances, in some negotiations, if people are afraid of you because they think you're crazy or you might do something nuts, sometimes that can work to your advantage. this is not one of those situations. You know, when it comes to foreign policy, is it possible that as the leader of a smaller nation, you know, you think about the Kim Jong-uns in North Korea, an economically smaller country, that to a degree, his acting crazy and seeming unhinged and like he's on a hair trigger to launch who the hell knows what kind of weapon, can that work in some nominal way to his advantage where there would be an incentive from other countries to say, listen, let's send him the food aid, let's send him a bunch of stuff that quite frankly doesn't cost us very much if it'll get him to postpone some of this belligerent action? Sure, right? Like at the kids' table, there is a degree to which seeming crazy and unhinged might get you some short-term benefit. But the idea that the United States on the global stage is going to benefit in terms of concessions, in terms of agreements, in terms of what's best for this country, from our allies and other countries thinking that Trump and Vance are unhinged pricks, we have seen no evidence that that is actually what is going to lead to the best outcome for the American people. So J.D. Vance's speech, I mean, listen, it wasn't literally written by Putin, but it might as well have been. And it seems very clear that this is the direction that things are going, and that's terrifying.
Well, I wrote a book after a long journey and a ton of work. I am really thrilled with how it turned out, and I hope you'll read it. The book is called The Echo Machine, and in a nutshell,
We bring in NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. Secretary General, very good to have you with us. You have just been in the middle of these meetings. We've seen some headlines. Thank you very much. We've seen some of these headlines coming out from leaders from Poland, basically saying that they understand that the situation is very different now. Europe absolutely must step up to the table in terms of expenditures. What is your take on these talks between the United States and Russia and Europe being excluded?